Happy Pride Month. While I've been out for a long time, I know how hard the decision can be. No matter what you decide, just know you have an entire community who both love and accept you. Enjoy. I knew that smirk meant something troublesome, at least for me, was about to happen. You should call home to let your parents know that those 45 minutes are getting extended to a few hours. Why? So that they know you'll be out longer than expected. No. I meant, why should I go with you? I agreed to a phone call, not spending the day with you. He smiled and shook his head. I don't see what's so funny. You continue to pretend like you don't want to be around me, and yet. Hello? My mom's voice said through the phone. Surprise and confusion once again crossed my face. Shoyo got up and walked to the kitchen. "Kay, is everything okay?" "Oh, yeah. I was just calling to say that there's been a change in plans." "You mean the 45 minutes Aki mentioned?" "Yeah. I'll be out for a bit longer." "Where are you going?" "I'm not sure, but I'll give you an update once we get there." Yes. Okay. Tell Tadashi hi for me. I've gotta go, but have fun and don't forget to call." "I won't." We said our goodbyes as Shoyo reappeared from the kitchen. He continued out the side door to the building connected by the walkway. I'm assuming that's his house, considering how he freely walks between the two. I looked down at the phone in my hand. For some reason, whenever I'm with him, there seems to be a disconnect between my brain and my body. Before my brain even has time to process what's happening, my body has already responded on its own. My hand automatically reaching for his outstretched one. My mouth speaking words I hadn't told it to. And now my fingers calling my mom's number even as I'm protesting to the idea. Nori exited the kitchen next, followed by a guy in an apron. They walked over to our table. "Done?" "Yeah, thanks." The other guy cleared the table and carried the dishes back to the kitchen in a dish tray he had brought with him. Nori smiled, then tended to the other tables. Shoyo came back through the side door. This time with his gym bag slung across his shoulder. "Ready?" "Sure." I stood, putting my hands into my pockets. We walked the next block over to the bus stop. The bus schedule said 3 minutes. "Where are we going?" "I told you. To meet my people." "Didn't I just meet your people? I have more than 2 people in my life." He looked up at me smiling. The sound of the bus turning the corner gave me an excuse to look away before he could see the red on my face. As we waited for the light to change, I pulled my bus pass from my pocket. Shoyo did the same. I changed my pass from my right hand to my left hand to make it easier to tap it on the fare box. Shoyo took this chance to once again lace our fingers together. There was a disapproving grunt from the lady sitting on the bench behind us. My instinct was to pull away, but Shoyo gently squeezed my hand and stepped closer to me. I looked at him, but his gaze was focused on the bus pulling to a stop in front of us. A determined look on his face. We moved to the side to make way for the departing passengers. Once everyone was off, Shoyo looked behind us and gestured for the lady to board ahead of us. He offered her a smile as she passed us. After paying our fare, we took a seat in the back, across from the back doors. Even though same-sex couples were more common and accepted, there were still people, mostly from older generations, that still believed it was wrong. Being that Aki and Yams were the only 2 people who knew about my sexuality, I had never personally encountered those people. Given the determined look and unwillingness to let me pull my hand away, I'm assuming he has. That's when the thought occurred to me. All this time we had been holding hands in public. Because I was so used to him just taking my hand, I never considered how brave that was. Since it's more normalized, I think we tend to forget that people like that lady still exists until we encounter them. He was still able to be courteous and respectful towards her indifference. He was braver than I had ever been at anything. After a few stops, he pressed the stop requested button. Once we got off the bus, we crossed the street and headed to what was definitely our destination. I texted my mom to update her on my location. "Stay here for a second." We had just passed through the gates when he let my hand go. Small groups of people milled around the area. some reacting to the bus as it stopped, hoping that whoever they were waiting for was getting off. Shoyo stopped walking and surveyed the scene. Then in 2 quick steps he was a few inches in front of me. His arms stretched out in front of him. A platform. I recalled the position from the sports website I had ended up on. I watched a video explaining volleyball basics. The video talked about the rules, player positions, and the sport as a whole. A ball came flying toward us. Once he saw the ball, he lifted his feet and repositioned himself in order to receive it. Split step. The ball connected with his arms and he sent it flying back to the hands of the person who had spiked it towards us. A boy with ink-black hair and blue eyes emerged from the shade of the building. I recognized him as the guy from the hallway. The one who had called Shoyo away to practice. "You're late. Anyone else here?" "No, just us two. Us 3. This is Tsukishima." He gave me a curt nod. His eyes held a territorial look that Shoyo didn't seem to notice. "You remember where the music room is?" "No. You'll have to ask the front desk lady." "Why?" "That's where Tsukishima will be while we practice. He plays the piano." The guy nodded slowly. A couple cars pulled in behind each other. The car doors opened and the rest of his team got out. Shoyo and the guy walked over to greet them. I stayed rooted to the ground where we had stopped. Something about him bothered me. His protectiveness of Shoyo made me uneasy. Then I remembered. It was the same look he had given me in the hall when Shoyo kept talking to me and Yams after being called over the second time. Shoyo and Yams were so busy planning our night that they hadn't noticed it, but I did. In all the chaos, Shoyo didn't realize that I hadn't followed them over. Not until he reached for my hand that wasn't there. He looked up confused. Then he turned around and saw me. A concerned look came across his face. He was in front of me before anyone could figure out where he was running off to. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I should go though." "Why?" He reached for my hand. I glanced at his teammates. "They're not like that lady. I promise. It's not that. My parents don't know. Yours do, and so does your friends." His face changed and I knew he finally understood. "This whole time I thought you were just shy." It was obvious that Yams knew, so I just assumed everyone else in your life did too. I shook my head. "Tsukishima, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault." "But." "No buts. I should have asked. I just really like you and thought maybe you were just playing hard to get." I didn't even consider. "Is everything okay?" The captain appeared behind Shoyo. "If so, we need to get started." I could see the struggle in his eyes. Torn between going with his team or staying and trying to figure things out with me. "Yes. Everything is fine. Sorry to hold you guys up." Shoyo still had his eyes on me. "Do you know if the music room is available right now?" I looked at his captain. "I'm not sure, but they'd be able to tell you inside." "Thanks. Shoyo, we should go. I have to practice too, remember?" I smiled at him. He released a breath and smiled back. "Right. Let's go." I followed the team inside. Shoyo glanced back every few steps to make sure I was still there. Once inside, the group separated. Those like Shoyo who hadn't had time to change headed to the bathroom while everyone else went inside. He watched as I talked to the lady at the front desk. After I started toward the direction she had sent me in, opposite the front door, he finally went inside. As I entered the music room, the door closing behind me, I took a look around. To the untrained eye, it looked like the instruments had been strewn about the room haphazardly. However, they were arranged like an orchestra, with the door taking the position of the conductor. String instruments in a U shape in the front, followed by wind instruments, brass and horn instruments surrounding them, then percussion instruments in the back. The piano set on the left side of the room, partly between the rows of wind and horn instruments. I walked over and ran my fingers across the keys. Some were a bit out of tune. The piano itself was worn but well kept. I lifted the lid to examine the strings attached to the keys that were out of tune. Since the piano was well kept, I looked around for a tuning kit. I found it on a back shelf. I carefully tightened or loosened the strings accordingly. Finally, the piano was correctly tuned. Returning the kit to the shelf, I sat down to play. I took out my phone and opened the metronome app. I played the first few notes of Shoyo's song, in time to the ticking of the metronome. Once I caught the tempo, I turned down the volume of the phone so that the ticking was barely audible. Placing my hands on the keys, I breathed in the familiar scent of the room. I played it twice over. Just as I was beginning to blend the end of the melody with the beginning of it, I felt the disconnection of my body and let the melody of his song flow through me. For the first time I played through where his song usually ended. Part of me knew I should stop to record, but my fingers never moved away from the keys. All at once, it hit me. The melody of his song was parallel to the story of us. It starts out with the keys in the middle, then gradually my hands separate. The steady back and forth of our conversations, with Shoyo being the soft welcoming keys on the right and me being the tense and heavy sounds on the left. Both melodies playing in sync but from opposing sides. I felt the tingling in my hands and smiled, my ears picking up on the sound of the slowly opening door. Resisting the urge to open my eyes, I continued to play, my heart filled with the thought of him watching me. As things wound down and the melody evened out, I finally realized that Shoyo's song was now our song.